Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to be talking about routers. Well, when I mention routers, I'm not talking about that little electronic device that sends your Wi-Fi signal throughout your house. I'm talking, of course, about the routers in the wood shop. And this whole concept of a show came from a viewer request. And I had someone contact me and they asked me, could I do a show explaining the different options of routers, etc., kind of like I did for the Scroll Saw Buyer's Guide quite a while back. And I thought it's a great idea for those who don't know. I'm not claiming to be an expert on any of these, but what I am claiming is that I can show you some of the different routers and the options that I personally have experience with, and I can give you my opinions on those. So without further ado, let's get into some routers. Well, before you can start to decide on what kind of a router or which router you want, you need to think, why do I want a router in the first place? What exactly is it that you're doing with this router? And if you have the kind of finances that you can purchase all the different types, well, you're golden, because what difference does it make at that point? But if your budget is limited and you're trying to pick the perfect router, you really need to decide what you need it for. So, do you need it for small roundovers? Do you need it for template cutting? Do you need it to use things such as rail and style cupboard doors? Do you want it for a router table? Do you want it to be mounted? Do you want it to be repetitive motion, like repetitive events? You really have to think about what you want this for. So why don't we start off by showing you the different types of routers that are available. Well, there are basically four major groups of routers that are available. Such as trim routers, they're mid-size, they're combination routers, and then of course there's the full size. And what we're looking at here is the baby of the groups, and this would be a trim router. This is a great little unit by DeWalt, and I've had this for years, and it's really a good little machine. It's great because you can use them one-handed. There's no need for two hands to be operating this. It has a low torque, so that's only one hand is necessary. It's quite adjustable, but this here would be for smaller jobs that you'd want to do around the shop. You're not going to be cutting any serious thick or heavy material with this, but it definitely has a place for roundovers, etc. Well, our next category of routers would be your mid-size, and that would be ranging anywhere from, say, 1 3/4 horsepower to 2 1/4. They generally have two handles, and this one here is actually part of a combination set, but I do not have the plunge base for it. But they'll generally have two handles, and that's because of the higher torque and the bigger base. They're much heavier than that trim router, and you really need two hands in order to operate one of these comfortably. These are great for mortises, dados, roundovers. This here is kind of the workhorse of the shop should you need an all-purpose, but at the same time, I wouldn't be cutting rail and style cupboards with this particular piece of equipment. So there you go. That would be the mid-size. Well, the next category that I want to introduce you to would be the combination kits. And this one here is from Rigid, and it comes with the motor for the router as well as two interchangeable bases that the motor can mount into, so you can have it as either a fixed base router or as a plunge router. And it's a great little idea, kind of a multi-purpose thing. You just want to be careful when choosing a kit like this. for cheapies. What I mean by that is, in general, sometimes in this case you get what you pay for, and if you see a combination router kit like this for $35, well, you're going to get the quality of a $35 router. So this here is the next category, of course, which is our combination kits. And of course, the last one in our group would be the full size, and these are 3 horsepower and up, in my opinion. This is my Freud. Generally, these bigger machines, like I said, in my opinion, they're not meant really as a hand router. They are big, they are heavy, they are cumbersome, and for my liking, these are the ones that you would mount into a designated device, such as, of course, a router table. And this is from my router table, as you can see with the base plate here. This would be our 4th and last category, as I said, full-size routers. Well, we've determined the 4 different groups or different types of routers that are commonly found in shops. Let's talk about some of the options. And what I want to start with is the power switches. Now, while it might not seem like that big of a deal to some of you, I think power switch location is very important when it comes to a router. Is it a make or break the deal point? Probably not. But if you're toying between 2 very similar machines and one has a better power switch, it may push you towards that one machine. And I don't mean the type of power switch. What I'm referring to is the location. Now, for this one here with my trim router, I'm not too concerned about the switch location of this. It has a good sturdy switch up here at the top, but this is a one-hand operation, and it has low startup torque. So if I'm able to hold it with one hand, I can very easily flick it on with the other and off, and it's not that big of a deal. Or if I'm supporting the base, I can easily, with my other thumb, as I'm using it, turning it on and off as often or as regular as I like. So I'm not that concerned about the switch location on a trim router. But on the mid-size, they have quite a bit more torque. And as I said, you do require 2 hands for operation. So holding it with one and having to reach to another part of the router for a switch does give you that opportunity to get that initial torque and causing you to lose control. I like this one because the switch is right here at my thumb. So I can still control with both handles as best I can and reach up with that thumb, still with full control, and flick it on. Absolutely great switch location for this particular router. Although this is my fixed base and I wouldn't necessarily be using it handheld, you could if you wanted, but look at the switch location here. Another great location for the switch. It is right here by the handle with a nice tab for you to easily flick on or off. On and off. Full control at all times with both hands on the router, keeping that torque from snapping it out of your hands or, digging in and causing you to lose control. Now we'll go over to this guy. And although this is one of my favorite routers, I really do love this router, I'm not a fan of the switch location, because if you're looking at this and I have both hands here, here's our power switch, way up here. My thumb, I would have to have a 12-inch long thumb to flick that switch. So with this particular one, I have to actually reach up and turn it on and off, on and off. However, this one does have a saving grace, and that will bring us to our next point, or our next feature of routers that you may want to consider. Well, now that we've got the switch location out of the way, you may be thinking, why does he really like that rigid if the switch is so inconvenient? It's all about our next option, and our next option is a soft start motor. And let me just take you back to the bench to our routers and demonstrate the difference between the two. Now we're talking about soft start, and what I mean with that is the motors don't kick in right away with their full force. They actually wind up to it, and that's the reason I'm not concerned about the switch on this one being out of reach of my thumb, because I can hold it with one hand, turn the router on, and while it's winding up to the speed which I have set, I have time, and plenty of it, to grab a hold of this other handle to get full control. So I'm not going to hold this. All of these are plugged in. I have no bits in anything, just for safety before someone of the YouTube police starts squawking. But I just want to point out to you that there's no bits here, and I'm going to flick on the routers and show you the difference in their torques. You'll find that the higher horsepower motors, especially these full-size ones, in most cases have soft start capacity. But if they don't, you might want to beware, because they can really have a kick at the beginning. So there's another option for you with a soft start motor. I'll just demonstrate what we're looking at here, and then I'll move on to our next option. We'll start with the big boy here. You can see there that there was very little torque. It didn't really move on the bench. And then I'll go to this one here that has the switch out of reach. And again, you can see not much movement on the initial torque of that particular router. Now we'll head over here and try out our little trim router and just give it a flick. Wow. Did you see that? That's the initial torque of that machine. I just want to show you that again. Let me get this cord out of the way and give this a flick again. The initial torque is actually quite high, but being a lower horsepower motor and very easily usable with one hand, it's not that much of a concern. This one here is the concern, and I'll just give it a flick. If I were just to let it go on its own without holding the cord, that's a lot of initial torque. So you really want to have your hands, both handles, and be able to turn it on and off. So remember guys, next option, soft starting motors. We've got the types, we've got the switch locations, we've got the soft start. Now let's talk about variable speed. Well, depending on the type of work you do and your level of experience, variable speed may or may not be an issue for you. Generally, the smaller routers do not come with variable speed. And you may be wondering, what is the point of that? You know, why variable speed? Some stock and some routing applications do not take well to high-speed routing. They do not take well to that major kick, to that bit going through the wood as quickly as what that router can go. And it'll burn your stock. Then of course, trying to sand out the burns, you end up losing the profile that you tried to route in the first place. So variable speed is a very good way to control that by, if it's too fast, obviously, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but you lower the speed. Is it a must? Should you have variable speed? I can't tell you that. Really, it's an option. And for the most part, 2 of these routers have variable speed. And it's the big boy over here in the router table, and it's this guy here, the rigid. The 2 DeWalt's are fixed speed routers, and they just go. Have I ever adjusted the speed? Initially, when I first installed the big guy in the table and this guy here, when I first started using it, of course I adjusted the speed to play with it and see what the best setting was. But once I got that setting, I haven't touched it since that day. So it's not really a make or break sale point, but it's just an option for you to be aware of, that it's out there. And if you have a fixed speed router that's burning your stock, you have no option really. You're reliant on the speed of the wood feed, whereas with a variable speed router, you can let the machine control some of that. So there you go. There's another option, which is variable speed. Well, the next thing I want to talk about is wrenches. And every single router comes with a wrench. Why? Those wrenches are to tighten the collets in order to install your router bit. But there are 2 major types of wrenches or wrench systems that come with it. And I just want to touch on this because for me, one of them I love and the other I'm not too fond of. So let's head back to the bench with our routers. Well, here we have our family of routers all playing nicely together, and they all have their own wrenches placed in front of them. And the first thing you should be noticing here is that our rigid has 2 wrenches. This is what I was referring to about the different types of systems for these wrenches, and that is one of them requires 2 wrenches to tighten or change a bit, whereas the other ones only require 1 wrench. Personally, I really prefer the 1 wrench system. And the way that the 1 wrench system works, let's just do the trim router, is there's a little button here on the side, and when you push that button in, at a certain point, it locks that spindle, and then you're able to get in there and use your wrench to tighten up your bit, and then just release the spindle, and that will spin once again. The rigid has a little bit of a different system. Let me just flip this around. There's a button that pushes in, similar to the rigid, and it has a pin. That pushes in a pin that locks that spindle. Same with the Freud. It has a mechanism, a mechanical lever that pushes in and locks the spindle. With this DeWalt, you physically have to get in with 1 size wrench, hold the spindle, while you get in with another size wrench and spin the collet. So you're doing this kind of a motion, and it's not my favorite way to tighten a router bit. It's extremely effective. It does do a great job, and I love this router, don't get me wrong, but if it were me choosing an option, and like I said, it's not a make or break sale for a double wrench or a single wrench system, but if this router and this router were exactly the same for features, and this one had a single and this had a double, I'd be choosing the single in a heartbeat, just to avoid that double wrench pain in the neck. So there you go. You can pay attention to how does your blade install, or your bit rather install, and how do you tighten it? You've got it all figured out. You've got your type of router, whether it's fixed or plunge. You've got all this other stuff, which family it's in, the horsepower. You know if it's single or double wrenches. You got a good switch location. But what kind of bits does it take? And in going with our last point of the double wrench or single wrench system, we're going to be talking about the different collets that are available for these routers. Well, for all intents and purpose, there are generally two sizes of shafts that are used when it comes to router bits. And they would be your 1/2 inch shaft, which is this larger one here, and your 1/4 inch shaft. When I say shaft, I'm referring to the connection point right here that goes to your router. And in general, you got to remember, I'm generally speaking here. I'm not saying it's written in stone, but in general, your 1/4 inch shaft bits are used for lighter operations. Like this, say, 1/4 inch shaft bit is, a 1/4 inch shaft is a 1/4 inch roundover, which is a light roundover application to take the sharp edges off of the boards. Whereas this one here, a 1/2 inch, well, this is a lock miter bit, and it's taking away a lot more material at a much faster pace, so it needs this stronger shaft, the larger size shaft, to prevent it from twisting off when it's actually cutting the stock, because there's a lot of pressure on this bit when it's cutting. Which one of these routers is going to take the 1/2 inch shaft? Well, I can tell you right now that I have never seen a trim router yet that has anything but a 1/4 inch collet, and there's nothing wrong with that. It has its purpose in the shop, which is a light duty, easily held hand router. And you don't want to be running a lock miter bit with a trim router. Absolutely not. You'll burn the router out or burn your wrist out trying to hold on to it. So this particular one only has a 1/4 inch collet. And when I say collet, let me just pan away from this here and show you a picture of the collet where the bit goes in. And there it is. And you have to realize that the bit goes in there and the collet clamps around it, and you are limited with a trim router to only being able to use 1/4 inch shaft bits. How about a 1/2 inch? You want to use it with this DeWalt. Well, this DeWalt has a 1/2 inch collet. However, are you limited to only using that 1/2 inch bits with this particular unit? Absolutely not, because this particular one comes with an adapter to use 1/4 inch bits as well. You want to be careful when using 1/4 inch bits with something as powerful as, say, the larger mid-size and the full size, simply because that extra torque can really twist off that shaft. But you want to think about your collet size and what size bits you will be using and what size or what type of work you will be doing. Are you going to require the extra power? And if so, you may want to be looking at something that has a 1/2 inch with an adapter or you know, a little higher horsepower. So there you go. The other option now is universal collets between 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch shafts. The next feature I want to talk to you about when it comes to routers is dust collection. I'm just going to roll a few pictures up here of the different dust collector tubes that have come with my routers, and you'll probably notice that some of them are still in new condition. There's a reason for that. It's because they are. Don't put too much weight into dust collection when it comes to a router, simply because of the fact that I have yet to find one that works efficiently enough to take away the amount of shavings that is created or generated by a router, regardless of the size. Now, the lead jig for dovetails has that vacuum attachment. That is something completely different. That is not something that goes directly onto the router. But for these little small router attachments for dust collection, in most cases the size of the attachment is too small, which means the vacuum is underpowered. On top of that, the hoses get in the way, they're cumbersome. You're fighting with the hoses, trying to get around them, and they're hooking on stuff. I've never found one that works. I really haven't. Even in the large router that I have in my router table, it does have a dust collection port, and I showed the picture of it here, and really it doesn't do that much. I ended up putting a 4-inch intake for dust collection into that router table to take away the chips that machine creates. So dust collection, it's out there, definitely. And they do come with it. Some do, some don't. But don't get hung up on it, because you could easily hook up something kind of aftermarket while using it. Dust hoods with your regular dust collector, even with a 2.5-inch hose shot vac hooked up to a smaller kind of hood to suck it away from your immediate work area, would work better than most of the commercially available dust collections on these routers. So there is dust collection, just to make you aware, but don't think it's going to be great. The next thing you want to look at with your fixed-based routers anyway would be your height adjustment. Now this DeWalt has a fairly simple system of releasing the lever, and then you just turn this dial here and it will lower or raise it accordingly, and it is quite effective. However, the adjustments are very coarse. It's not a you can play with it to get very specific dialed in depths of the router bit, but it's a little more finicky than one with a micro adjustment. So one like this one that has a smaller micro adjusting knob here with just ever so slight turns, you can very easily go in 64ths of an inch to get it up or down, if that's an option that you require due to the work that you do. If you require that kind of precision, then these micro adjusting knobs may be something that you want to look into. Now, one of the options that you may not be aware is out there, and they are available in the kits, which would be the fixed base and plunge base kits. And that is the quick motor release mounts that are on these. And in this case with the DeWalt, it's two little tabs here that pushes out and you can just remove your motor. Now, what's the purpose of this? Why would you want to remove that motor? It doesn't make any sense for some people. Well, you know, there are more applications for routers than just having them in this base to round things over or follow a template. This motor can be mounted in other jigs to serve other purposes, duplicating machines, that sort of thing. If you're going for a large one like this one has no option like that. So what you see is what you get. You're stuck with that. This one here, you're stuck with it the way that it is. But with these ones here that have the removable bases, you have the ability to remove that router motor and use it for other applications, such as, say, a lathe duplicating machine. I'm not going to get into how to make one of those. That's another show in itself. But think about it, you know, a combination kit with a removable motor. Another thing you may want to consider is what type of subbase these routers have. This router plate here on the bottom of this particular router is a fixed base. However, it is removable, and there are other bases that are available for this particular unit. as are most of these routers here. Why is that important? Well, this particular size hole here is for use for certain collars that would go mounted inside. One similar to this one right here, just like that. This is for a certain application. This is actually for a dovetail jig, but there are other ones that you can use when you're following templates. If you have a larger hole here, that option is not available to you. However, if you only have the small hole, then you don't have the ability to use the larger diameter bits. So it's something that you may want to look at, and that would be this particular hole in your base plate. Some of the cheaper routers, this base plate is not removable. So keep that in mind. If it's removable, you can make your own custom if it doesn't have the proper size hole. If it's not removable, you no longer have that option. So keep an eye on them and think about it with a removable base plate. Well, we've touched on switches and collets and soft starts and dust collection, base plates, and we've mentioned several times about the combination kits and the removable motors, but we haven't said much about the plunge router. So let's just briefly look at the plunge router and sort of give a little synopsis of that. Well, here we have our plunge router base, and there is no motor in this right now. The reason for that is just for ease of demonstration. It makes it a lot lighter and easier to use. When using a plunge router, you may note that it can be a little top heavy. So you just want to be careful with using it. But the purpose of the plunge router is exactly what it sounds like. You hold your two handles and you use it in order to plunge your router bit into your work. And what kind of a silly application is that, you might think? Well, what if you're trying to hog out an area, just rough cut it out, and you need it at a certain depth? Well, the plunge router base would have depth stops on it that stop it from going any further than this particular depth stop, and you can start it at anywhere in your project, start the motor, plunge that router into your stock. You can lock it, see that one finger locking, and now it's set at that depth. And you can go through, hog out your material as you wish, and when you're done, give your locking lever a little flick and you can raise your bit up out of your stock and away from any more cutting. Great for things like templates, routing out letters, that sort of thing. It definitely has its use in the shop with the depth stops, etc., etc., etc. It's just something that you want to keep in mind, that the option is out there if you're looking for a combination kit, that the plunge router does have its place. Okay, another option that is available should you want it, work lights. Some of them out there have LED work lights that are built right into the router base, which do a great job of illuminating what you're cutting. In order to utilize those lights, of course, you have to have your eyes down at a level in which to see that work. But that's not that big of a deal. You should be using your PPE anyway, so those lights can really assist to see what it is you're working on, especially if you're cutting along things like a free drawn line or lettering or that sort of thing, or as I said in the last segment, a plunge router where you're hogging out some material. You need to know where to stop, and that router can create quite a shadow in there, so it's nice to have the light to illuminate your work. A couple of my routers have that light, and I have to say it's a nice feature and it does work well. Another feature that may not seem important to some, but I want to make you aware it's out there, and that is removable cords. It may not seem like a big deal, but depending on how you store your routers or your equipment, eventually that bending of the cord from hanging off the top of the machine can cause it to short circuit, and then you're looking at getting a repair job, or if you know what you're doing, you can repair it yourself. Either way, it can be a pain in the neck. But some of them do have removable cords, and they just plug in like a normal cord, and you have to get it aligned properly and keep your glasses on. And then once they align, they twist lock in. Now that cord is now attached to this router, and it unlocks and removes just as easily. So it's something to keep in mind. If you store your routers in such a way where that cord can be in your way, they do come with a removable cord in the end of the motors. Okay, so that is pretty much the general options available for routers. I've probably missed some. I did say I'm not an expert on this, and I'm only going by the options of my personal experience with the routers that I have. Which one is right for you? I can't really tell you that. You have to decide what you need your router for. If you're just looking for a light duty type of router for odd little roundovers, small little jobs, maybe some light joinery, you know, a trim router may serve you just perfectly. Just remember that you will be limited to 1/4 inch shaft or shank router bits. If you're looking for something more of a general purpose in a handheld kind of a unit, then you may want to go with a mid-size to a combo kit, whereas your mid-size would be fixed motor in a fixed base, and your combo kit would have the removable motor with the variable bases of plunge and fixed. Much more options or much more flexibility with the combo kits. However, again, the price is much higher than one that strictly has the fixed base routing. You know, those are for the handhelds. If you're looking for something to place into your router table, I would highly recommend a full size. Don't go downsizing on your router table for the sake of, you know, cost. You're better to hold off, save your money, get that little higher price router with the bigger motor, because you will be much happier with the results as opposed to putting an undersized motor into a router table, and now you've got problems where it can't do the job efficiently. So which is right for you? Trim routers with their options for small jobs, mid-size for medium handheld applications, kits with plunge and fixed base, again for handheld operations, but more versatility than just your fixed base, and then the full-size big behemoths for your router tables. I hope that's helped you out. And there you have it. Routers, a buyer's guide. Guys, this is more of an informational video for those who are new to the hobby and are confused by what's out there in the market for routers. This isn't necessarily aimed at those of you who have 5 or 6 routers in your shop and have been using them for 30 years. Pretty sure you got a good handle on what's going on. This is more to bring to light to the newcomers the options that are out there and try to clear up some of the confusion as to what some of the routers may be for and what maybe they should be looking at for their shop based on the type of work and their skill level that they're at this point in time. So I hope it's been helpful to some of you. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know there's no project, but some shows are like that. And guys, I want to thank you all for joining me here again today, and I'm going to see you again real soon with yet another woodworking video.